This is not a random drawing. It's one of the oldest math homeworks in existence. You're looking at a student's notebook from somewhere between 1800 to 1600 BC. The teacher likely asked something like, if each side of a square is 30, what is the diagonal? And the student was learning how to multiply the square root of 2 to get the result. Their schools trained professional scribes in geometry, algebra, and accounting. But about 4,000 years later, our classrooms still feel the same. This is a photo of a classroom from the 1800s. And this is a classroom in 2025. Do you notice anything different? Besides the modern interiors and uniforms keeping up with time, nothing much has changed with regards to how we think about education. For centuries, we've had the same tools and methods. A teacher addressing a group of students. A one-to-many format. Textbooks, lectures, note-taking assignments, the same stuff. Despite so many technological advancements that have happened, not a lot of them have made it to our classrooms. But why? Here's what I think. For most of human history, the bottleneck in education was access to information. Then the internet actually solved that. And suddenly we had way too much information. The new bottleneck became making sense of it all. How do you find the signal from all this noise? How can we organize and present all this information better? The big promise here, AI. And unlike previous waves of edtech hype, this one actually feels a little different. AI doesn't just give you information, it helps you understand it. It can meet you exactly where you are and guide you forward. It can explain the same concept in 10 different ways to 10 different age groups until one of them clicks for you. But here's what keeps me up at night. We've seen promising technology fail to transform education before. The internet, MOOCs, iPads in every classroom, all of these ideas had potential. Yet the fundamental model of education is yet to change. So what makes this time so different? What would it actually take for AI to break through where technologies that came earlier failed or fell short? I spent the last few weeks trying to answer this. And in that process, I dove into the research. I looked at what's actually happening at classrooms, tested some of these tools myself, and also talked to someone who has been thinking about this problem for longer than most of us. His name is Ben Gomes, and he is Google's Chief Technologist in Learning and Sustainability, and also one of the people who shaped how we search for information on the internet. Let's dig in. Let's start with what everyone is talking about. Personalized learning. You hear it everywhere. Every AI company promises it. But what does it actually mean? I found a research paper that analyzed 78 studies on AI-driven personalized learning from 2019 to 2024. And here's what really stood out to me. Most of these studies focused on something called as adaptive learning. This is where AI adjusts the difficulty and pace of content based on how you are performing. It adjusts to your learning rate. But there's a catch. The research warns about something they call as cognitive offloading. Basically, what it means is when students have an AI that can answer everything, they stop thinking for themselves. Their critical thinking skills actually decline. And it's not just theoretical. There was a massive study at the Wharton school with nearly 1,000 high school students in Turkey learning math. They split these students into 3 groups. The first groups used only textbooks. Another group got access to ChatGPT-4 as a tutor, basically ChatGPT for homework. And the third group got a specially designed AI tutor with guardrails that would guide them, but it would never give them direct answers. During practice sessions, the ChatGPT group performed 48% better than the textbook group. Amazing, right? But here's the kicker. When they took the actual exam without AI, they performed 17% worse than students who never used AI at all. The students who only had textbooks. They had gotten so used to AI giving them answers that they actually never learned the underlying concepts. The AI became a crutch. But the interesting part is what happened with the third group, the one with AI that only guided them. They performed 127 times better in practice and scored the same as the control group on the exam. They actually learned. So the technology is actually working, but only when it's designed to make you think and not think for you. I wanted to dig deeper into this problem, so I got in touch with someone who is an expert in the intersection of AI and education, Ben Gomes. Ben Gomes has spent over 20 years at Google Search, shaping how billions of people access information. Today, he is Google's Chief Technologist of Learning and Sustainability, thinking about how AI changes learning.
One of the biggest promises of AI in learning has been that AI can help you personalize your learning experience. Um, what does that really mean other than that slogan? Like, what does that actually look like?
I think that's a really good question, because people use the word personalization in many different ways. I think there are multiple levels at which you can think about personalization. The first step is I think AI can allow you to uh, go on a journey of your own, an active journey of your own. You're interested, earlier I was just looking at the history of Bangalore, right? I'm interested in the earliest periods, even pre-Kempegowda, like what was the history of Bangalore. I can go on that journey and follow the journey as my interest takes me. So there's a personal element there where my particular interests can drive my learning journey. So that's one thing. The second thing is that it can also enable me, it can also be used to figure out what I know well and what I don't know well. So we have this quizzing product that after you answer a quiz, it'll identify the areas where your weakness is by semantically analyzing it and then give you more questions in the areas where weakness is. So that's a different kind of personalization, which is not possible in an overall classroom where you're giving the same quiz to everybody. It doesn't necessarily get at helping them figure out their weaknesses. But you need the help. AI can provide that helps you learn about this topic where nobody around you might be an expert on that topic. And the same thing is true for many other areas. AI can give you the ability to learn something that triggers interest in your mind and pursue that journey. And from there, you can broaden out to other things too.
When I went to meet Ben at the Google office in Bangalore, he sat down to show me some ways he's been implementing this approach into a learning tool that he's been working on. I'm sure that if you watch 100x, a lot of you would know what this tool is. It's called NotebookLM. Here's the concept. You upload sources like research papers, articles, videos, and instead of just summarizing them, it helps you engage with them. So here I can just create a new notebook and I can upload all my sources over here. I can upload drive links, website, a YouTube link, whatever it is. So let's say that I want to learn about the transformer architecture, the revolutionary paper that came out, which is attention is all you need. So I'm just going to add some YouTube sources. So now I already have a basic summary over here, but the fun part is I can actually interact with this. So let's ask something like, what makes the transformer architecture better than previous ones? So it's given me the answer over here, and every point has its source website as well. So all of these are like verified answers. But here's the fun part. There are multiple ways to interact with these set of sources that I've given. So for example, here we have a quiz. There's another cool feature which is basically called a mind map. So it breaks down these concepts into smaller chunks so that I can explore each and every one of them whenever I want them. There's flashcards, but I've saved the best for last. My top two favorite things over here is the podcast and the video overview. Check these out.
It's kind of the engine behind this whole AI revolution that seems to have happened almost overnight.
Yeah, exactly. We are cracking open the machine itself, the revolutionary transformer model. It was introduced in that super influential 2017 paper, Attention is All You Need.
That's pretty much a customized podcast that was generated from all of my sources. The videos, the articles, the blogs, the research paper, all of it combined. This tool pretty much just generated an entire podcast for me, and now I can listen to it whenever I want to. And that's pretty cool. I really like that. And I also like this one last thing, which is the video overview. So this is pretty much like the podcast, but in a video slideshow format. Check this out.
You know this massive AI revolution we're living through? The chatbots, the image generators, all of it? Here's what we're going to do. First, we'll look at the big problem that AI used to have. Then we'll dive into the animal didn't cross the street because it was too tired.
Pretty cool, right? What I love about this tool is that it's not really replacing the cognitive work, but it's actually just reducing the friction to actually enter into complex topics like this. What struck me the most here is the design philosophy. It's not giving me answers, it's giving me structure. It's not replacing my engagement with sources, it's actually making that engagement easier and much more in flow. That distinction is what really matters over here. But here's what I kept wondering after I used this tool. Does this actually work for everyone? Or is this just another tool for students who are already motivated? Because honestly, one of the biggest problems in learning and education is motivation itself. So I went ahead and got an expert opinion on this.
So I run a company called 100x Engineers, and we are an education company. But when you are an education company, you're solving for two things. You're solving for both education as well as motivation. I think AI is a great tool for the curious. If I'm a curious person and if I want to follow my curiosity, I think I have a superpower in order to do that. But do you really think AI can solve for motivation in a meaningful way? Because that's the problem a lot of people face in terms of learning. They probably just lose motivation and end up giving up there.
I think that's a really great question. I mean, I think it's a fundamental question within learning itself, right? How do people get motivated? And I think you have to go back and say, like, why do people motivated or not motivated? I think the biggest source of motivation is people, and it's teachers. One thing AI can do, and we've seen a fair bit of evidence of this, is AI can save teachers a lot of time. If you ask teachers around the world today, this is the problem everywhere. Teachers are burning out. You can't get, it's harder and harder to find enough teachers. And so if you can free up their time so they can actually provide that inspiration that the human being does, I think that is one of the biggest unlocks. So Google Classroom, we can see, like, actually can save teachers a lot of time. We hear it anecdotally, and we begin to see it more systematically, at least from teachers. When they use these tools, some of the repetitive tasks that they have to do can be greatly shortened. Because most people who become teachers get into teaching because they love that process of inspiring students. But in the actual process of teaching, there's so much other things they have to do that sometimes gets compressed. And they don't enjoy it as much, and the student doesn't get as much. So I do think unlocking the potential of the teacher as well is fundamental. Because to me, the human being is fundamental in that process of learning. Right. Like, that inspiration comes from the person. We learn because of other people. We don't just learn in an abstract way. Even people who think they're self-motivated, they often are motivated by a social context, some other ways in which they are actually motivated to learn the topic they're learning.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting, because there's been a big assumption in education tech. If we just give students better tools, they'll learn better. But honestly, it's not that simple, and we've seen it through the decades. I found another Stanford study that specifically looked at this question. They tested an AI tutoring assistant with 900 tutors and 1,800 students from Title I schools, basically schools with high percentages of low-income students. They called it Tutor CoPilot. And here's the key. The AI wasn't tutoring students directly. It was only helping tutors be better tutors in real time. So a tutor is working with a student who gets a math problem wrong. The tutor clicks a button and the AI suggests something like, ask the student to identify the number in the problem. Or maybe something like, have them draw out what's being subtracted, depending on what the problem is. Students whose tutors used this AI were 4% more likely to master the material. But here's what blew my mind. For lower rated tutors, which means tutors who are not that great at teaching yet, the improvement was 9%. The AI was closing the expertise gap over here. It was scaling what expert teachers do naturally, which is asking the right questions at the right time, to tutors who hadn't developed that intuition yet. And the cost, $20 per tutor annually. Compare that to traditional professional development. So I started seeing a pattern over here. The AI tools that work aren't really replacing human interaction. They're augmenting it. They're making the best teaching practices available to more people. And that one simple thing made pretty much all the difference over here. Now, I wanted to pick a little more of Ben's brain on what he thought about all this. So, back to Ben.
So in terms of the assessment process, I think assessment today is sort of for the whole class. But if you think about the purpose of assessment, it's understanding where do the students, what do they understand, what do they not understand in the class. If you can give them a more personalized kind of assessment, so for instance, a quiz product we have within Gemini guided learning, right? It can adapt based on what you don't know. That kind of assessment, if you can aggregate that kind of information across a classroom, you can begin to get a much better signal of what the students are struggling with. Because that is part of what the purpose of assessment is. The second thing is also, I think, pushing the assignments to actually be more challenging and being clear about what you expect the students to do with AI. Do you expect them to use it for brainstorming? Do you expect them to use it to help them with
So are you
writing?
suggesting that these models and the use of intelligence should be a part of these assessments?
I'm not a teacher, so I don't want to presume that, but I do think there are schools that are being tried along these lines where actually the amount of time the students need to learn to spend studying is being reduced and showing the same outcomes. So there have been some experiments of this sort. I think that the core piece is I think that I'm seeing that is working is when the teachers engage to actively with the tools themselves, and then find the right way for the students to actually actively engage with the students. So they role model for the students what active engagement with these tools is. Even within a university, you'll find that teachers and professors are approaching AI in very different ways. And I think that process itself is a useful process, and in that process we'll figure out what are the best ways and most effective ways by doing some testing around those processes.
One thing that is very clear right now is that we are entering into a world that is becoming very AI native, where intelligence is becoming commoditized and is accessible to everyone. In a world like this, for a student who's in school or college, what is the skill that is going to be relevant? Because now a lot of these specialized things are probably no longer relevant because they can be automated. So what are the 1 or 2 skills that you can think of that will still be relevant in the next, let's say, decade?
So today, I think we need to move to a world where it's not just learning the mechanics of doing things. It's not just learning a collection of facts, but learning how to think about that, to up-level the thinking at a higher level, to get the concepts right, because the first principle thinking, right? Because I think there's a huge number of problems in the world. One of the things you need to be able to do is identify a problem, think about it clearly, and come up with a solution. Whether you're working in a larger company or you're trying to start a new business yourself, right? The key thing to do is figuring out what is the problem I'm trying to solve. So I think that kind of critical thinking skill is unbelievably important. It's important today, but it'll be even more important in the future. So I see that evolution of like this, that kind of skill, I think, as being really important. And that'll require, again, going back to the other thing of active engaging with information, right? When you're studying something, you can't be just absorbing facts. You need to engage with information to turn that into something meaningful in your mind.
Right. So it's ultimately moving away from doing very specialized skills like completing a task or getting a certain result, rather than it's moving away from that and going into more of, hey, here's a problem, let me figure out what exactly the problem is and what is the ideal solution, and then figuring out everything in between.
There are also pointers to other tools that we have, like the YouTube is also a really important resource. If you don't understand something, I mean, create the best place to go. So there are creators who will give you a different way of potentially looking at the same content.
Do you think you would ever launch a feature where if I ask a question, it makes a YouTube level video for me to explain it?
I think what we have in YouTube is we have attached quizzing and so on to existing creators. I think creators have that human element that's really important. So
But I think AI is very capable of making explainer videos like that.
You know, when I use YouTube, I actually end up with a relationship with the creator.
So do you remember the question we started with? What makes this time different? And here's my answer. Every previous wave of EdTech asked, how do we deliver information faster? But AI forces us to ask a better question. How do we help people think? The Wharton study proved it. Giving students an answering machine makes them worse learners, but a thinking partner that guides without telling, well, that actually works. The Stanford study showed that AI does not need to replace teachers. It makes every teacher as effective as the best teachers. And here's what gives me hope. For the first time, we have technology that can meet every student exactly where they are, right now, not in 5 years. Remember that ancient Babylonian student learning geometry? They learned through human guidance, through questions, through struggle and breakthrough. This is not about replacing teachers. It's about freeing them to do only what humans can do. The mentoring, the inspiration, the connection that no AI, I think, will ever replicate. But only if we get it right. Only if we design these tools to make students think and not think for them. Only if we make these tools accessible for everyone, and only if we remember that education isn't about generating an answer, it's about developing minds. 4,000 years ago, a teacher asked a student to find the diagonal of a square. Today, AI can help billions of students answer questions like that, not by giving them the answer, but by helping them discover it themselves. The future of education is not really technology replacing humanity. It's technology finally catching up to what great teachers have always known, which is every student can learn if you meet them where they are.